morning in 2001, a mother and father were getting ready for work. They had two beautiful daughters and successful jobs in New York City. Their 1-year-old was sick and the nanny was running late. So the parents flipped a coin to see who would stay home and who would go to work. My dad lost that flip coin, and it turns out that my cold saved his life. If my dad, a first responder and an electrician, had won the coin toss, he would have been called into work, but he stayed home with me. It was September 11th, and he worked in the World Trade Center, where 2 of the 4 planes crashed that morning. His entire crew perished that day. If the nanny were not late, if I were not sick, or if the simple luck of a flip coin did not occur, I would have no dad. Now imagine Christmas Eve in New York City 15 years after 9/11. I am no longer talking to my father, who 15 years earlier just narrowly missed death. We were killing time before our dinner reservations, and everything seemed normal, especially my dad. But that all changed unexpectedly when he told us he had prostate cancer. I didn't say anything and had no empathy for him, because at this point in my life, I simply did not care. I already felt like I didn't have a father, so the fact that he could eventually pass away from this did not faze me. He's been constantly sick with post-9/11 illness, so it was not new to me, and I did not care. You're all probably thinking, what is wrong with you? Your dad has cancer. Well, guess what? I really did not care what happened to him, and I had not since I was 10. Today, however, if the same situation happened, I would have been a complete wreck because I learned how to forgive. Forgiveness is gaining compassion for those who have wronged us. Letting go of the past and moving on can be a difficult task, but it brings peace to the soul and builds character. So today, I'm incredibly happy to be sharing my story with you and the lessons I have learned about forgiveness. So let me fill you in as to why I was no longer talking to my dad. After he was a first responder, he became extremely sick with post-9/11 illness and 99% disabled from the debris at Ground Zero, the site where the first responders were saving the victims and pulling dead bodies from the ruins. I can never imagine being a part of something so heroic and devastating at the same time. Years later, when we moved out of the city, and I was 7 living on a 155-acre lumber farm in upstate New York, I felt like I had a perfect life filled with family, friends, and love. I was so fortunate to be going to private school, living in a big house with lots of land to run around, a goldfish-shaped pool, and lots of dogs and cats running around with me. I was happy, and I thought my family was happy. However, for years, my mother and father tried to hide from me and my older sister how much he was struggling with his health and his marriage. My father retired, and my mother did not work, so money started to become an issue. Of course, I had no knowledge of any of this. I remember the day I started to hold a grudge against my father. In March of 2008, I walked downstairs to screaming and crying. I remember facing the kitchen, standing by the couch where my parents stood fighting, not even noticing our presence. It was the most horrific sight to see as an 8-year-old. I was confused and scared of my father. My sister, who was 12 at the time, would scream, "Stop fighting," but nothing worked. My father threw my mother's keys in our direction and left without saying anything. That was the last I saw of him until 2010 for my birthday. It was really scary seeing him after all of that. I did not talk to him. I did not even look at him. My mother eventually became a different woman from all of the sudden changes in her life. It was not what she wanted or planned for, obviously, but not being prepared for these changes caused stress and panic. I hated seeing her like that. It was eventually hate that I felt for my dad because I blamed him for all of our problems. My sister and I having to go to public school in Syracuse, New York, living in a 1-bathroom house with 3 girls on a busy street, then my mom struggling to find a job for years on the edge of being broke, and this gap he created in our family. Our lifestyle was completely upended, and it was his fault because from my point of view, we went from an almost perfect ideal life to what felt like nothing. In 2011, while my parents' divorce was being finalized, I was ordered by the court to see my dad once a month until I was 16, but every month I never wanted to go. This cycle of seeing my dad once a month, not talking to him when we weren't together, and the discomfort I felt whenever his name was mentioned only reinforced my resentment. I resisted kicking and screaming until I was 16 just to get into his car. Being in the city was not enjoyable anymore. I would feel sorry for myself and sit in his small apartment. On one visit, he had a complete breakdown, driving my sister and me from a medical appointment he had. He pulled the car over and started to cry and apologize. He knew his actions and habits were affecting us negatively, mostly because we let him know it. He felt remorse for what he had done in his life and how it affected us. I wanted to cry and say that everything was okay, but I didn't. I forced myself to say nothing. I forced myself to feel nothing. My sister stopped seeing my dad once a month since she headed off to boarding school in North Carolina when I was 13, and I had to go visit him alone. When my sister was there, I had someone, but I didn't anymore. My father was often irritable and still recovering. It took energy to ignore, complain, and fight with him. When my friends would ask about my dad, I would say, I basically don't have one. I would go days and days without thinking about him, talking to him, and forgetting he even existed. But today, as we listen to the twists and turns of our lives, I'm incredibly happy to say that I no longer hold this grudge that I had since I could remember. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. This quote was first presented to me by my teacher, and I knew it was perfect for my talk. You see, when I was at my lowest, the person I least expected was there for me with no judgment. He told me he was going to help me. From that point, I expressed to him how unhappy I was in Syracuse with my mom and at my school. Without hesitation, he found St. Andrews and North Broward Prep, two boarding schools in South Florida I could attend my senior year. After visiting, I was all for it. I mean, compare South Florida weather to upstate New York weather. I was obviously down for it. But mostly, I wanted a do-over. My father was the one who gave me the opportunity, and I will forever be thankful. From that point on, I slowly started to let go of the grudge, as he became a steady presence in my life since the first time I could remember. It was very much like a weight being lifted off my shoulder when I was finally able to let go and forgive during the time my dad was there for me. Because I was the one drinking the poison all along. I thought, what is the point anymore? I was in pain from all the time and energy focused on hating him, which affected me more than it did him. I realized by changing my attitude and appreciating his role in my life were the two key things I had to work on. I used to think that it was him, that both he and the past had to change for him to ever earn my forgiveness, but I was wrong. So paradoxically, it was my father who taught me the importance of forgiveness, as he was the one person I told myself I would never forgive. This year, I spent every weekend in February with him, traveling to different cities, sharing a hotel room. A few years ago, if I had to spend even one weekend with him, I would have thought it would be the end of the world. Surprisingly, it was some of the most fun and memorable moments I may have with my dad as a teenager. Our relationship today is only becoming stronger each time we are together. Since I have awakened to this new power of forgiveness, especially for those closest to us, I'm upset about all the times I missed out on because I was holding a grudge against my father. I'm also beginning to understand that forgiveness all around is the best medicine, and therefore, I am forgiving myself for holding a grudge, and I'm resolved to carry this lesson with me wherever I go. Today, I'm empowered as a result of this ongoing decision, and I invite you to join me. So I offer this advice from Hannah Arendt. Forgiveness is the key to action and freedom. If you are stuck holding a grudge against a friend, a coworker, a peer, or family member, think about the importance and positive qualities of that person and decide if that grudge is worth the extra stress and energy. I don't know each of your stories or the hurt that someone has caused you, but I do know how good it feels to just let go and be free. Thank you.